Hi, my name is Dana Reisman. I'm a graduate student at Morningside College. The title of my research paper is The Effects of the 95% Group's Phonics Lesson Library on First Grade ELL Students' Reading Success. The problem is that more English language learners, or ELL students, are attending public schools, and teachers are not sure how to best meet these students' needs. There's an achievement gap between ELL and non-ELL students. On standardized tests, ELL students are performing below grade level in reading and math. So I wanted to find out if using the 95% Phonics Lesson Library, or PLL, with ELL students as a small group intervention would help with their reading success. As part of my literature review, there was many different pieces. I broke it down first as a language barrier. Why does a student struggle? Is it because they don't know the English language? Or is it a problem because they don't understand the concepts? In fact, it takes up to 7 years for students to learn the academic language. So when teachers are teaching, they may not know the vocabulary that is learning because it's not part of their language. The question then becomes, is it language, they don't understand English, or is it actually the academic use and vocabulary that they're not understanding, or they just don't understand the concepts? And the theoretical framework that goes along with my research is the bottom-up processing approach. This approach takes the foundations of reading. First, students need to learn that there are letters and that correspond with sounds. They need to recognize what those letters look like and then put those letter sounds together to make words. After they're able to read the words using the sounds and letters, they are able to then read phrases, sentences, until they're actually able to read books and passages. And another part of my literature review refers to the teaching strategies. It is important that teachers make accommodations, whether it's teaching students who are ELL or not ELL. Then one way to accommodate is for teachers to scaffold their information. Scaffolding can be used with the I do, we do, you do model. The Phonics Lesson Library, or PLL, follows this model. The teacher introduces the target skills first. Then, as a group, with the teacher included, they participate and practice. And finally, students are asked to practice the skills on their own, while the teacher is present giving feedback. Another part of the teaching strategy is to teach in small groups. The PLL is an intervention focused on small groups. Other studies I found for my literature review focused on small reading interventions. In fact, when the students included small reading interventions and were given the core reading curriculum, they were able to outscore students, or their growth outscored students who just had the reading curriculum. Other studies show that when students were both given phonological and comprehension instruction, they made growth. And there was another reading intervention called HELPS, which increased students' reading fluency and comprehension. The PLL is a reading intervention based on phonics skills and phonemic awareness. There's a little comprehension piece as well. The intervention is given to students, and they are also given the core curriculum, much like these other studies included in the literature review. There was a gap in research. The gap included not sure if students were having difficulty learning because they didn't know the English language or they weren't understanding the academic pieces. Another research gap is included into how much intervention is needed for ELL students. If they attend ELL, is that enough, or do they need more intervention, and who should be providing that, the ELL teacher or the classroom teacher? The purpose of the study was to determine if the 95% group's Phonics Lesson Library program with ELL students would increase their reading achievement. There was not any other study that used this intervention reading model, and it was hypothesized that ELL students' achievement would increase after ELL students partook in the small group intervention. The method participants were 15 ELL students in first grade. These students were identified as ELL based on their parent home surveys. The socioeconomic status of each individual student was unknown, and there was no incentive offered for students to participate in this study. The study took place with 15 students divided into 3 small groups of 5 students each. The materials included in this study were those needed for the FAST assessment, the Houghton Mifflin Harcourt First Grade Core Curriculum, and the materials supplied by the 95% group's PLL lessons. Those materials included magnetic letters to make words, sound boxes to put the letters into each word, and words for them to read and sort by if it met or did not meet the target skill that was being practiced, like words with short I. If the word was hit, yes, that would meet the focus target skill. If the word was not, then they would separate that into a no, that does not match the target skill. Also, there were word phrases and sentences for students to read. The reliability and validity found in the FAST assessment could be broken up into 2 different ways. There's concurrent validity and predictive validity. The concurrent validity was determined by using 2 different assessments that tested the same skills. The predictive validity is a way to predict how a student would score on a future assessment based on the same skill and their scores on that particular assessment. The procedure for this test started with all students being assessed with the FAST assessment. Then I looked at their composite scores to determine who fell below the benchmark. And based on those students who fell below benchmark, if they were also part of the ELL program, they were included in this study. I then followed the 5-day plan of the PLL, which comes with a 5-day lesson plan. The data analysis plan included in this study was a two-tiered sample t-test to compare students' FAST composite scores from the fall to winter and winter to spring. The means scores were used to compare for the pre- and post-intervention phase. Here is a table that describes the results. From the fall to the winter, their t-scores were negative 14.25, and then there was an increase about 4% for the winter to spring. The p-values stayed the same. This graph represents the student means and standard deviations. As you can see, the means and standard deviations increased over time. The number 1 represented the fall testing period, number 2 represented the winter testing period before the intervention started, and the number 3 represented the spring testing period when the intervention was done. The 1 fall testing was a baseline point. The results did not confirm the hypothesis because the baseline period also showed a significant difference between mean scores. So before the intervention even began, there was already an increase from the baseline point to the pre-intervention phase. This study implies that there could possibly be some reading achievement gained from the phonics lesson libraries because the mean scores did continue to grow throughout after the intervention. This study implies that students definitely need to be determined to find out who would be placed in an intervention. In fact, early intervention detection for an intervention can increase students' success in school throughout the years. There's also implication for teachers, noting that teachers should definitely use the FAST assessment to screen students to find out who would best work from an intervention. And then, once the student's in an intervention, the teacher needs to follow that plan with fidelity, using those teacher strategies for students to learn the best. The bottom-up processing was an important part of this study because it increased student reading achievement by breaking reading skills down into first learning letters and letter sounds, and then combining that all together into passages and aid for students to read. This study did have limitations. One of the little limitations was the assessment. This study only compared composite scores from the FAST assessment. There were other studies that used the subtests from the FAST assessment to compare data growth. Also, students may grow throughout the year, so it's difficult to exactly know if they made growth because it was throughout the year, or did they make growth because they had the PLL as their reading intervention. Another limitation was the participants. These participants who took place in the study were all second-year ELL students. There was also a big number of participants, which was 15. They needed to be divided into small groups as part of best practices. However, the small groups changed throughout the weeks of the intervention based on whether or not they were understanding each of the target skills brought about in the PLL. The 95% group's PLL is also a limitation because there is limited research as to if this is a successful intervention for students who are not ELL and for any other students in older and younger grades. The recommendations based on this study is that it did not confirm the hypothesis because there was a significant difference between the mean scores throughout all of the recording data phases. Further research is needed to determine if using the 95% group's phonics lesson library is an intervention that shows reading growth, and it also needs to be determined how to best successfully group these students, especially if there's a large amount, to make sure that they're all receiving the same instruction. Another consideration could be taken into, instead of just looking at FAST composite scores, each subtest could be looked at as well. Thank you for listening to my presentation.